Welcome to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's live streaming interview series, where leading new thought teachers, speakers, and authors share the intimate stories behind the 10 best spiritual books that inspired them the most on their spiritual journey. From well-known classics to hidden gems you might never have heard of, the No BS Spiritual Book Club saves you time and money by sharing reliable recommendations from those who've walked the path before you. The No BS Spiritual Book Club, the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to inspire your own journey of self-discovery. Here's your host, founder of the No BS Spiritual Book Club, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's live video series, and with me today to share the stories behind the books that had the most significant impact on her life is Sunday Times bestselling author in the fields of spirituality, the science of the paranormal, dreams, and the afterlife, Theresa Cheung. Theresa's an expert on dreams and dream interpretations, and she has 3 best-selling books on the subject. She's also got several other very high-selling books that have been translated into over 40 languages. She's been interviewed on Coast to Coast and numerous other international TV and radio shows. Theresa Cheung, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
I'm really excited to be here. Thank you. I love the title, No BS Spiritual Book Club. Love it.
Yeah. And before we start, you've been researching and writing about dreams and dream interpretation for, 25 years now? What was it about dreams that fascinated you so much?
The Wizard of Oz, I think. I watched it and I thought, I want to have a dream like that. I think that with that film just had such an impact on me. I remember going to sleep at night thinking, I want that dream, I want that dream, I want to go to Oz. So in a way, I did go to Oz through all my weird and wonderful books. I've traveled to the world of dreams and the impossible and the unseen since then.
That is the first film I remember seeing, and it left me with nightmares for months.
Did it? What was it?
Yellow Brick Road and the witch terrified me. So, yeah, child abuse.
I love that film, and actually right now it's becoming so relevant given what's happening in the world.
Yeah.
What we see happening, is the witch going to melt or not?
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start by asking you, what do books mean to you?
Books, well, I kind of grew up in books because my mum was a very avid book reader, and we didn't have much money when I was growing up, and people would say if we could eat books we'd be obese, because literally I would go downstairs and there would be piles and piles of books. I mean, she felt at home in books, and I think that's where my love of them came from. She was never without a book, and I inherited that, and I just was a voracious reader. And some of these books were so life-changing and opened my mind in such a way. I guess I thought, I want to do that. I'd love to write books that can also have a positive, mind-opening impact on others. And I hope I've been able to do that in some shape or form with my many, many, many books.
Yes, you certainly have been very prolific. I don't know how you managed to fit them all in.
Serial writer, that's what I call myself.
Now, you did say in the intro on your 10 best page that there's some research to suggest that people who read books tend to be more compassionate than those who prefer movies or TVs.
I only recently found out about that, actually. I was writing a book about kindness, actually, and it came up on, my research that there was some research done where they had TV watchers and book readers, people who had a preference, and they asked them a series of questions. And at the end, it was found that people who read books tended to be more empathetic and more compassionate. It was particularly the case, actually, with fiction book readers. Non-fiction as well, but fiction book readers especially, I guess, because when you read a work of fiction, you've got to enter a new world and understand different points of view. So I think that's really interesting that people who do read, because when you read, it's called lose yourself in a book. And someone who's very sort of like self-absorbed would find that probably quite hard, because they're so in love with who they are that losing themselves in someone else's world or someone else's thoughts. So I just think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating, and it makes sense, because when you think about it, you have an opportunity to enter someone else and see
Yes,
the world from their point of view,
yes, that's
which
what it
we
is.
don't often do, in any other circumstance. And we learn, about people's thoughts and the perceptions and the way they problem solve and think about things. Yeah, which actually means that these kids of today
Need
that are
to read.
spending all the time on the computer, they need to read more.
I mean,
Yeah.
I guess on computers we do kind of see stories. I mean, YouTube and all these videos, they do have kind of a story and a narrative, but a lot of it's, people giving lifestyle advice and whatever. But the good old-fashioned story, watching it's not quite the same as reading it, because when you read it, you can bring your imagination into play. Because when it's on a screen, it's all set out for you. And
Yeah.
that's what's so wonderful about reading, and why encouraging children to read I'm also passionate about. I've done work with doing that, in that I think it gives them that creativity, but also that empathy and compassion. I didn't know that from that research, and I'm even more passionate now about getting the world to read, not sing, read.
So the second question that we always start with is, what was it like having to pick 10 books out of all the books that
Awful. I
you've read?
didn't like you for it, because I wanted to pick an infinite amount. And actually, I'm looking at my list now and I'm thinking, no, why didn't I put what was it, the boy, the horse, and the boy, the fox, and I can't remember the third.
Is that the new one? The
Yes,
recently released one?
I
Yeah.
should have put that one on there. It's a children's book, but oh my goodness, it's an adult book. I think everyone should read it. It's glorious. And then there's other titles that came up as well that I missed. So it was just a moment in time. When you got me as a moment in time. So it's by no means definitive, because that list changes. But these are books, I must admit, though, that I have referenced. They're chosen for a reason, because at moments in my life I read them. They were very important to me. They really helped me, and that's why I put them down, because they all had a really positive effect in different ways.
And that's the whole point, the book club and the choices. Now, interestingly, you say that your first choice is part autobiography. The next 5 choices are non-fiction, and the final 4 choices are fiction.
Yes.
Because you wanted to include different genres to suit all tastes.
Yeah, I mean, spiritual books you tend to think non-fiction, don't you? The how-to guide, personal story, and whatever, and that's great. But I really had to go to fiction, because I just love fiction reading. I'm never happy unless I've got a good fiction read on the go. And I wanted, but there's some incredible spiritual fiction out there, and I wanted to bring attention to that.
Okay, let's start then. So number 1, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, first published 1946, very soon after the war. And it's become one of the most influential books in America. So what was it about this book that really moved you so much?
Well, because we all have our dramas and our, difficult. I mean, I've had my heartbreaks and my disappointments in life, when I felt, why me? Woe is me. And then you read that. I mean, this man was in a concentration camp, saw the people he loved die around him, had everything taken away from him, and yet he had inner strength. It's a remarkable tribute to the power of the spirit. And I do think it gives a sense of perspective when we have concerns. He literally went to hell and back, but was able to retain his dignity. I'm not a religious person, and the book does reference religion, but to me that doesn't matter. It's about the inner strength, showing just, they can take, like in Braveheart, they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom.
Yeah, I was reading about it earlier. I haven't read the book itself, and it says that Frankl argues that we cannot avoid suffering, but we can choose how to cope with it, find meaning in it, and move forward with renewed purpose. And at the heart of his theory, which is known as logotherapy, is a conviction that the primary human drive is not pleasure, but the pursuit of what we find meaningful.
Meaning, yes, a life with meaning. Yeah. That's what we all want. And that's the reason when people go off the rails or make difficult decisions or have addictions, is because their lives lack meaning. When you can find meaning, it doesn't matter what it is, but something that gives you meaning, you kind of saved your life in a way. That's what we need to have in our lives, meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
And that's why
true.
Meaning, and it doesn't matter what it is. If you find your meaning doing the gardening, if you find your meaning through raising your children, whatever, it doesn't matter what it is, but the meaning, something that is bigger and greater than yourself, something that you can lose yourself in and that you love doing because you think it's important and it makes the world a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. I watch so many young people today who right now feel, what kind of future have I got? I do hope that we can provide some meaning for them.
Well, you're actually highlighting, I have 2 children. My son is 22, my daughter is 20, and they are both thinking, what am I to do with work? I mean, one of them is trapped in Cambridge and university. She's trapped there at the moment because the residence requirements, they can barely go out of their rooms. Everything's online. My son is graduating from LSE and looking at the work market and thinking, what am I to do? It's such a difficult time at the moment. And I'm being challenged as never before to put some of what I've written about into practice, to helping them find the tools and techniques to navigate this strange new world we live in. But then again, I guess you look at generations past, the younger generation often has such a tough time, during World War I and World War II, wiped out because of what us elders were doing. We've got to really look at that and take better care of our young people, I think, at the moment. They are bearing the brunt of what we're doing and the world we're creating. Although, of course, the pandemic is outside of our control. That something happened. But goodness, I think young people today are going to need spiritual strength as never before.
Yeah.
Because the jobs aren't there. They aren't there. They're going to have to create a whole new way of being.
Some years ago, I interviewed Patricia Aberdeen, and she had written a bestseller, New York Times bestseller called Megatrends 2000. She's a kind of futurist. She wrote another book around about 2012, a kind of update on that. And she was pointing to the way society was changing and work was changing. More and more people were leaving the workplace, choosing to earn less, but have more meaning in their lives and make their passions, their talents, their work. So if somebody was really, loved making jewelry or clothes or whatever, they were finding ways to turn that into the business to sustain them and having a much simpler lifestyle in order to have the meaning that brought into their life. And I think, that's something we're going to have to encourage the children. What is it that you really want to do, and how might you be able to turn that into something that could support you?
Yeah, it's finding out what makes your heart sing. What do you want to do? And a lot of kids don't really know because the education system hasn't helped really them find out. No. All of them are on this treadmill thinking it's like the old way, qualifications, job, whatever. That's all.
It's gone. That's gone.
2020 anymore. Living up to its title of clear vision, really, it's almost like we're going to think of life before 2020 and after, a huge turning point, and how to help them, but that's another book.
Yes, that's another book. So let's go on to book number 2, which is The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success by Deepak Chopra, published in 1993.
Oh gosh, you're showing my age. Can you stop doing that when they're published?
Well, no, you could have read this book last year.
1946. No, the reason I chose it, now I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with Dr. Chopra, and that there's a lot about him I don't gel with. I'm going to be honest here. And I've actually had a phone conversation with him because he was going to be on my podcast, and it was awful, actually. I'll give you an anecdote. I was so nervous to talk to the mighty Deepak Chopra. But he wouldn't, he had to do it on the phone. He didn't want to do it by Zoom or whatever. And he agreed to be on my podcast, but he had to do it on my phone. And I suddenly realized I don't know how to record a phone call. So I downloaded this app, right? And was terribly nervous, did a really interesting phone call actually we had. But then realized that I hadn't changed it to US settings and I'm in the UK. So I had silence. So I went back to him and he said to me, quite frankly, if you can't get your act together. So it was kind of like, sometimes, you can be so in awe of someone. And I thought, oh, take pity on me. I messed up the technology. Please help. But he didn't. And that was quite harsh. And I actually did a podcast episode, the Deepak Chopra episode that was not happening. But here's what we spoke about. So I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with him. And a lot of his marketing and branding, I feel, is very antithesis of spirituality.
Yeah.
But however, I think this book, he shines. I'm not in alignment with many of his other books, but this book, I think, is his moment for me, where he sets out 7 principles for living a spiritual and meaningful life. And what I love is he sets out the principle, and then after it, he gives practical how-to ways to do it. And these principles are beautiful. And I think that's how I want to remember Deepak. None of the other stuff.
Yeah.
None of the other stuff, none of the rah-rah celebrity mayhem around him and the court cases. I don't know. But whatever, that's how I want to remember. This is beautiful. This is beautiful.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's really about discernment and accepting the message, and you don't have to accept the messenger.
Yeah. I'm not that down on him. I'm sure he's a lovely guy. It's ever just my interaction with him was a bit spiky, and that was particularly hard when you venerated someone, and then you have an interaction. But they're human, aren't they? I think we all are guilty of putting people on pedestals. He's a human being, and maybe actually he was being very authentic and honest. It's right. If you're going to speak to Deepak Chopra, get your technology sorted. But I was so nervous, I forgot to change the settings to US.
You know what? It happened to all of us, and even some of the best in the world screw up sometimes. We're human.
Well, if you want to see me screwing up, watch me on episode 71 of Russell Brand Under the Skin. That will make you feel better. Anyone who's fluffed an interview or made a fool of themselves on a grand scale or fallen over in public and feeling very sorry for themselves, go and watch me do it 10 times worse there. That was overwhelming, that experience. And I'm like a rabbit caught in the headlights. And it's popular, that episode, for all the wrong reasons.
Well, you're a brave lady to take him on. I don't know that I'd want to be interviewed by him.
Well, I was very honoured he invited me. I was so honoured. I mean, it was such a massive platform, because this was the first time actually I'd come face to face with a bona fide Hollywood celebrity. And I went to his house, actually, because he has a recording studio. He lives quite close to me here in the UK. And I went to his house, and his staff, his production team were lovely. He was lovely. But then the interview, we were like walking in opposite directions. He had one approach and I had another. But what's lovely about that interview, it starts off really uncomfortable, because he doesn't know what to do with me, because I'm way too old for him to flirt with. He didn't really know who I was. And he's like, who is this woman? And I'm sitting there going, I'm in front of Russell Brand. I don't know what to say. And I started talking about the movie Ghost and Patrick Swayze, The Love Inside You, Take It With You. And he wanted to talk about the science. So you can see how funny it ended up being. Actually, if you want to see Russell Brand in his comedian form, because he starts cracking jokes as well. And then what's so lovely is that we have this dissonance in the beginning, but then we both kind of size each other up and start bantering. And it's a lovely journey of an interview. I hate that word journey, but it is. So have a laugh. If you want to have a laugh, episode 71, Under the Skin, you can see me making a public fool of myself, as I hope I'm not doing now, guys.
No, don't worry. You're amongst friends here.
Thank you.
We're all friends. So book number 3 is this comes up time and time again.
Does it? Oh, I'm boring.
By Don Miguel. I mean, I love it that these classics come up again and again and again. I mean, we know they're popular. We know from the sales, but it is so nice to hear how they impacted different people.
But it's so important today, the 4 agreements. I mean, the first agreement, basically keep your word. Be a person who's, when they say something, does it. Be a person of integrity. My goodness, don't we need that message today with what we're seeing on the world stage in particular? How important, we've all forgotten the importance of that. And how do we teach our children that, the value of that, when they see, mentioning no names, very high profile people doing the exact opposite, you know, and seemingly being very successful doing it and having lots of money and lots of popularity and lots of status and lots of likes and likes and likes. How do you, but I think, get them to read that book and it will explain in a way that maybe we can't, in such a beautiful, eloquent way, why that matters so much. And also the importance of taking things personally as well. We all think everybody's thinking about us all the time and what we're doing. And to be honest, most people aren't. They're just worrying about what they're doing.
Makes you wonder why books like this are not required reading status in schools.
I wish they were. I truly wish they were, just those. And also I love the simplicity of it. It's like the Deepak Chopra one, just the 7, very simple, because I think often in the New Age spiritual movement, what should be very simple is complicated too much, with talk of chakras and meditating for hours and ascension and archangels and crystals and blah, 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 blah. This is so common sense, simple, spiritual truth. And I love that. And I've tried in my books to do that, to make what's overly complicated sometimes just sound simple.
Well, the older I get, the more I value the simplicity in books, you know, make it down to earth, make it practical, easy to understand. We don't need all the bells and whistles. We really don't.
Or the products, or the sign up for my course.
Exactly.
Or come and see me on a big stage and pay X amount. Yeah. Anyway, I better say no more.
Number 4, another classic, The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle.
Well, what can I say? All we have is now. You know, we spend so much time obsessing about what we did yesterday and worrying about tomorrow. All we have is now. The magic is now. The eternity is now. The afterlife is now. Everything is in now. Let's make magic now. And I know I realized when I was putting it there that everybody would probably put this, but it's for a reason. I mean, there's a reason why these 2 books come up time and time again. And I just want to give yet another big shout out about how that book really helped me. And what I enjoy about The Power of Now is the author as well. He's such a strange creature when you watch him. But what I love as well is that he'd have this really deep statement and then he'd start giggling for no reason. And I don't know whether he's thinking, well, I've just stated the obvious here and I'm this huge celebrity because of it. And this is how because he really has stated the obvious. And it's almost like he kind of knows that when he's talking. But what he's saying is just so obvious. Why can't you see it? And I love that about him. I love watching his videos. They're very calming, but he has this light on, this joy, this giggle, this inner giggle.
When did you read it?
Oh, I think I've read it many times. I probably read it 20 years ago. I can't actually remember. It just seems to have always been a part of my life. I don't know. It just seems always to have been around for me. I can't actually remember the first time I read it. I've just kept returning to it over and over again. It seems to be a part of me now.
Yeah, it was one of my bookworms just a couple of months ago. It had a big, I read it on a plane and I've never forgotten that plane journey because by the time I got off, I'd had so many kind of epiphanies, I couldn't stop talking about them.
That's the power of an amazing book. And I said there's a reason why it's probably, I think, the best-selling spiritual book of all time. It could well be up there, isn't it?
It's I'm sure it's up there. I mean, certainly I remember somebody once said that it's a book not just to read, but to spend a lot of time mulling over. And I love books like that. I love mulling over. You know, if something gets me into that place where I've really got to think about this, it's a good book. So, number 5, another one that I love, The Road Less Traveled, A New Psychology of Love, Traditional Values and Spiritual Growth, M. Scott Peck.
Yeah, another classic. Again, I'm going to remove the religion from it. I don't read it from that perspective. I'm spiritual. I'm not religious. The religious is fine if that's who you are. No harm in that, and if it harms no one, great. But for me, it's the spiritual message of there is value in suffering, as hard as that may sound. Progress is never made in your comfort zone. And we all seem to think that our life owes us a living. Life's got to be fair, that life's got to be blissful. We're all searching this elusive bliss. And the reason I love this book, and it was so powerful to me, is I was going through a hard time when I read it. And I realized that there was value in that, because people show you who they are when they're going through a hard time. You learn about yourself when you're going through a hard time. It's all very easy to be a kind, decent person, charismatic, when life's treating you well and everybody wants you. But you find out who you truly are when the going's tough. You really do. And it's those moments that shape you. And they're so powerful. It doesn't feel like it at the time. It feels like, why does life suck? Why? But it's for a reason. It's molding you. It's shaping you. It's helping you learn and grow. You don't learn and grow in your comfort zone. And I wish in the New Age movement and whatever that people would stop trying to chase this elusive, blissful state, because there's no growth there. Growth's got to be in the struggle. And that sounds hard.
No, it's true. It's
That's
true.
How, divorce, business failure, bereavement, these are all spiritual opportunities for spiritual awakening and growth. And as hard as it is, and I know we don't like that, none of us like it, we all want life to be this magical, blissful time. And it can be, and there are moments of that, but you don't learn and grow then. And that book put it in a way far better than I could, to stop expecting life to be fair. Because when you do expect that, you're going to be hitting your head against a brick wall. You're going to be putting your expectations on other people to treat you in a certain way. You're going to be putting your expectations on life and feeling like a victim. And so this book really helped me stop feeling like a victim and realize that, I show the world who I am during struggle. It's when you get the rejections, it's when things don't go well. That's who you find out who you really are. Are you a strong person, spiritually strong, or are you a reed blown in the wind who's getting their identity from externals? Sorry, I get really passionate about it, but that book really...
That's what it's all about. So book number 6, again, another classic, The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho. It must have been a good decade, the 90s, because so many classics were published then. Yeah.
It's interesting because we were coming out of the 80s, which were, the business cards, the shoulder pads, the materialism. And it's almost like the world, and I'm probably a product of that, got tired of that. It was all very exciting. We were going to identify ourselves with what we had, stuff. And yet we realized that stuff, the external, really can't give us meaning and purpose. And I think that's why this crop of books came out, because it spoke to a need. And you see that with rich and successful people. If material wealth and status, if popularity was the answer, why are there so many unhappy, wealthy, famous people? And these books kind of answered that need. And The Alchemist is a beautiful, because we're going now into the realm of storytelling, and I love storytelling. It tells you in a beautiful way, how, again, all that life experiences is shaping you, signs and coincidences, how important they are to you as well. And I just love it. And I actually, earlier this year, I had the opportunity to speak to the publishing executive who signed and discovered this book, because he decided to write a companion volume to it, called A Companion to It, because he realized that people were interested in alchemy.
Is that Colm Holland?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was lovely, and I felt that The Alchemist was working again its magic, because the day before his publicist got in touch to ask me to talk to him, I got an email from someone I'd done a podcast with in Spain, this was like 6 months after saying, oh, look, we've edited your podcast. It's going out. It was for university students. And to thank you for all that you've done, I want to gift you my favorite book. And it was The Alchemist. I didn't think anything of it. And then the very next day, I'm in touch with the publicist the person who discovered it. And I thought, again, this is The Alchemist. That's how it works. It's like these amazing synchronicities start occurring. And it makes you think of life in a magical way. You know, expect the unexpected. I love that.
Yeah. Always keep an eye out for the unexpected, for sure. Yeah. So number 7, a favourite of many, The Lord of the Rings of Tolkien, published in 1955. I'm glad you put that in there. You're the second person to do that.
Oh, am I? Oh, good. I'd like to find out who's the first person. Can you remember?
Oh, I can't remember. It was 2 or 3 interviews ago, I think.
Oh, don't worry.
I'd have to look.
I will take my passion for that book to another level. I've even named my podcast after it. I have a podcast called White Shores. And if there are Lord of the Rings fans out there, they will know what White Shores is. It's where the elves and the fairies goes. It's the afterlife. It's the unseen. It's the undying lands. So I've taken it to another level, and I had a lot of scientists on episode 1 of my podcast, and I tortured them all by asking them which character in the Lord of the Rings they would be, and it was really funny finding out who had read it and who hadn't. But yeah, I love that because it's got everything, you know, the ring, the elves, the fairies, the magic, the journey. Frodo's story is particularly touching because he's seen the invisible and the unseen, and at the end he can't live in the material world anymore. It's just so many themes there. And as I said, I have taken it to another level, my enthusiasm for that book. And I've infected my children with it as well. Every Christmas we have to watch all 3 director's cuts. We watch them. Not only have they read the books, but The Hobbit wasn't quite there for me. I didn't enjoy The Hobbit as much, but Lord of the Rings, it's magical.
It's got everything. It's got everything. And I think any writer would say, God, if only I could write like him.
But also, did you know Tolkien inspired J.K. Rowling?
Yes. Yeah.
And George R.R. Martin, Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
You know, you can see in Harry Potter, can't you? You can see all elements of the Lord of the Rings in there and how it inspired her. And interestingly, Tolkien actually had an angel experience. He believed he saw an angel which reassured him that his son, who is fighting in the war, because he loved his son Christopher, because they wrote the books together, he was so worried about him that he thought he'd never come back from the trenches. And he had an angel vision which reassured him his son would return, and his son did return. And then they went on to write The Hobbit. And so that endeared me to him even more, that he had this transcendent
experience.
Vision. And that you can see in the books, his belief in the invisible and the unseen, and his reverence for it and respect.
Yes. Yeah. And another fiction book that really wowed the world. Now, this one, actually, I think that has sold something like 80 million.
I should go into fiction.
The Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield, again published in the 90s.
Got to get out of the 90s, haven't I? That book is I love it. You feel like you're going on an adventure with the author, and you're discovering with him that each time he gets another awakening. And I love the way that he was able to touch millions with a spiritual message in a way that maybe the non-fiction approach simply can't. It makes spirituality adventurous and fun, because we sometimes have this idea that it's tedious and overly serious, and I love the way he was able to do that, and the fact that 80 million people have read it shows, you know. I
remember reading it. I was already on my spiritual path, and I thought it was fantastic that somebody had written fiction, was waking others up. But I remember going on holiday to Spain and seeing so many copies, people reading it around the swimming pool, and there were people that you knew this was the first time they'd been exposed to some of this information, and it was like, oh my God, you know, he's touching people in a way that they've never been touched before.
Exactly. And that's why I'm very excited. You know, I often talk about movies now and films, and that's a way also to bring a spiritual message to millions of people in a way that maybe a straight spiritual non-fiction book can't. You know, the spiritual themes in a lot of movies out there as well. You know, that is a way to give a covertly to impart a spiritual message. So again, on my podcast, I get all my guests to recommend a movie with an underlying spiritual theme, because that, you know, you engage young people and you get family talking about it. You know, like, and I've worked on the Star Wars. I did a book in tribute to the Force. You know, that's one of my ways. You know, the Force in Star Wars, I think there's a reason why Star Wars is so powerful. It's not special effects, and it's not the gorgeous Harrison Ford, even though his character has died now. It's that underlying, what is the Force? That spiritual message, that's what's bringing people back. Because we all want to be a Jedi. We all want to master the Force. And so I love that. And George Lucas as well, you know, he actually took elements of spirituality in creating the Force. It's Buddhism, really.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's a philosophy of life. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent. Back to Celestine Prophecy. Is there a film of that? I'm not sure. If it is, it probably isn't very good, because I can't remember it.
There is a film of that book, and I remember watching it and thinking it's not very good. And I've just noticed that is not the one that has sold more than 80 million, but it has sold a lot. One of your books has, and we'll get to that one. It's probably no secret to anyone when I give the title that it's crashed 80 million plus. But yes, no, the movie there was something a little bit, I don't know how easy it is to make movies of these books. I mean, you think about the movies about Shirley MacLaine's book, Out on a Limb, and you think about The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. I mean, I thought that one was quite good, but the Shirley MacLaine one, there was something not quite convincing about it. And I felt the same with it felt a bit contrived, the same with the James Redfield. But that was just me. Yeah.
You need a sensitive director, perfect casting. I think, you know, you need someone who's really in tune, not someone just doing it as a story. Not a story. It's so much deeper than that. I think it would need the right director.
Yeah. So book number 9, The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, Mitch Albom. 2003, we're out of the 90s.
Yes,
we're into the noughties or the aughties. So what's it about this book that you liked?
Well, I love it because it shows that nothing we do in life is trivial, even though we think it is. You know, these split-second decisions we've made, people that we, you know, have barely met, that they actually are very important to the bigger picture of our lives. And we've all had this chance encounters or people who we've maybe only met for a moment, but have somehow changed the course of our life. It's the fact that nothing is trivial.
Yeah.
In though we think it is, that you know, it's like the Sliding Doors movie shows that, you know, just rushing to a train and we're angry because we miss it, but missing it may have happened for a reason. And again, it gives you that sense of maybe things are happening for a reason. We don't know. Maybe it is all random. I don't know. But I like to think of everything as a miracle, that things do happen for a reason. We don't understand it in this life because we're like the underside of a tapestry, all knots and loose ends. Then when you turn it over, you can see the bigger picture. So when you get frustrated because you're queuing or you can't get a parking spot, maybe there's a bigger picture. And I love that book kind of does it in a beautiful story kind of way, that the first 5 people you meet in heaven are not the people you might expect.
Yeah. So number 10, the book that has sold more than 80 million copies, The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown.
Yeah, despite Tom Hanks's haircut in the movie, I'm sure the movies help shift those copies as well. I love that book because I love reading. I'm an avid reader. But I'd heard a lot of hype about this book, and as it's about, you know, it was said to be controversial, I thought, yeah, I'll go and get it. You know, I had a look at it. I sat down, and it's a book that I didn't want to go to the restroom. I didn't sleep. I had to know. And that no books had that impact on me. I had to know, because this was before, you know, when it came out. It was, you know, real definition of a page turner. You wanted to solve the clues. You wanted to know. It also made me, after I'd finished it, go and research what the author was suggesting and the story was suggesting. It made me so curious again. I am a theologian. I studied, you know, theology at Cambridge. But this brought me right back to why I did. It gave me why I love studying and why I love what I do. It made me so hungry and so curious to know more, and a book to have an impact like that.
You know, it amuses me because so many people deride Dan Brown and say he's
jealous.
The writer. He may not be, but he is a great storyteller. And that's the important difference, because we all love a good story. Have you read his book Origin?
I haven't actually.
His latest. Wow. Now that is I mean, it's just as gripping as everything else he writes. It is a page turner. But when you get to the end of that book, you think he's nailed what's happening in the world. He's nailed exactly where we're heading, where we're going. And I'm not going to give anything away, but it was a very surprising ending. And I was just filled with admiration, because I thought, this man has done his research, and you know, he also could be called a futurist. It's a great book to read.
Origin, I will check it out. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. No, I just insatiable curiosity that it spiked in me again, because I think sometimes we get very sort of like stuck in our ways, you know, and it reminded me to be curious, because I think the definition of a spiritual life is to be curious. Yes. And I maybe because of, you know, life was so busy, you know, the routine, that I'd lost a bit of my curiosity, and it got me back there again.
Good. So that book was nominated as one of America's best loved novels by PBS's The Great American Read. I mean, he's a master storyteller, an absolute master. And again, one of those people that you think, God, I wish I could tell stories the way he does.
I know. I actually did dip my toe into attempting to write fiction. And I did write the first chapter, and then I read it back and I bored myself. So I realized that, you know, when you yawn, you think, this is not good. This is not good.
Yeah.
I would actually I think I'd need to go some classes. There's an art to it. And one day watch this space, but I'll probably do it under a pseudonym. I'll probably do something.
Yeah, that's probably not a bad idea the first time one does it. Test the waters. So out of these 10 books, if you had to give, you know, if one of your children, young adults, came to you and said, I really want to, you know, have some guidance on a spiritual path, I want to explore more, which book would you give them to read?
Well, I'll give the book that I didn't include, and I should have done, The Fox, the Horse, and whatever.
You're gonna have to tell everybody about that book.
Well, it's just about a delightful encounter between a boy and two animals. And, you know, they're supposed to, you know, one of them's supposed to eat the other. The Boy, the Fox, and the Mole. Is that right? Please tell me if I'm wrong.
I can't remember
it's number one bestseller at the moment. It's huge. And it's just like a kid's book, but it's huge. But the life wisdom in there in such a lovely way about what really matters in life. I would give them that, first of all, because we live in an age now when people's attention spans is short. And this book is one that you can read literally in 20 minutes. But within that 20 minutes, you've got everything you need for a spiritual life. So with that, but if I couldn't do that, I'd go to the Four Agreements for its simplicity and its practicality and its no nonsense approach to being a spiritual, decent person, loving person who can go to bed at night with no regrets. And that's what we want. You know, when we go to our final good night, we want to go without any regrets. And I think if you just obeyed those, and he's actually done a fifth agreement, which is be skeptical, but listen. I love that. He's added another one, hasn't he? But those four, won't give them away if you haven't read it. I've given the first one away, which is Keep Your Word. But the other three as well, just so powerful.
Okay, so keywords. When we set up the 10 best list pages, we wanted keywords from everybody, and of course we have the biographical ones, the author, etc., etc. You've given us dream oracle, spiritual being, serial, paranormal writer. I want another keyword or phrase that gives us an insight into Theresa, that her children and her husband and her best friends know. Something
Do you
that
really want to know that?
Are you a secret closet? You know, somebody put cupcake connoisseur. You know.
Well, shall I put it this way? After my interview with Russell Brand, spending an hour and a half with him, off camera, he told me I tripped him out. Now, with Russell's background, so if I can trip Russell Brand out, you don't want to go there.
A tripper outer. Tripper outer. Or a tripper upper.
He tripped me out. That's what he said. Now, given his background, what we all know about Russell, at the time I was quite hurt. But actually, I kind of now sort of thought that's quite a compliment. I don't know. Is that?
I think it is a compliment, because I can imagine not much trips him out.
Yeah, I think it's because we were talking about, because I was on there to talk about being intuitive and mystical in a material world. And I was talking about the world of the invisible and the unseen, near-death experiences, dreams, angels, psychic cats came into it. Patrick Swayze came into it. Anyway, so yeah, I think it's because his podcast tends to be more grounded. And this really did go to a place which he did actually admit sounded a bit like when he was on one of his drug trips.
Okay, well.
But I was just speaking my truth. But, you know, I was quite nervous, as I am now. You know, I get nervous. I'm not, you know, I don't do too many interviews, probably for good reason, Sandie.
Okay, so tripper outer, or maybe it should be tripping out Russell Brand.
Is this a dream? Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Theresa, you and I did another interview just before this one for a British TV show, and you very kindly offered the viewers of that show a free gift. Would you extend that to our viewers?
Yes, absolutely. Just email me at angeltalk710@aol.com. And don't laugh, I am still on AOL. That just shows what a dinosaur I am. But it's my reader email. It's in all my books, and I've just kept it there because some of my books published 20, 30 years ago are still in circulation, so I don't want to change my email. If you have a dream that you're really struggling with, and you just want a few pointers, I'm more than happy to do that, or to send you a copy, a digital or a hard copy of one of my dream dictionaries, or Night Vision, which is a recently published book I did, which is an illustrated guide to dreaming. I'm more than happy to do that. And I want to thank you, Sandie, for what you do. You are a joy. You know, as I said, I've done a couple of interviews now, and you're just so lovely.
Thank you.
You're lucky to have her. Thank you. Thank you. Making me feel at home as well.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, I think we've come to the end of this particular face-to-face event. Thank you, Theresa, for joining us. If you want to know more about Theresa, you can go to her website, theresacheung.com, TheresaCheung.com. When we've edited and published this far and wide, Theresa, it will have your name and your website on it. So there will be no doubt. And also, just repeat the email address one more time before we leave.
AngelTalk710. And if you're into numerology, you'll get that, at AOL.com.
Theresa Cheung, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. And thank you for all you do.
Thank you. And thank you again to everyone who's here with us live, and those of you that might be watching this later. If you want to be the first to be notified of and to view these events, you can join the No BS Spiritual Book Club's private Facebook group. You can also visit the video page at the No BS Spiritual Book Club.com, where you can download the audio version podcasts. you can also sign up for the Save My Space at these. We don't send out the last minute reminders to anyone other than those who have asked us to save their space. If you think that you might need a last minute reminder any week, that is the best place to make sure that you receive one. Thank you, everybody. It's always a delight to have your company, and I'll see you again next week.
Sweet dreams.
Brilliant way to end it, of course. Sweet dreams. Bye-bye.